I am, and I feel all that's here. I will pave the road back home, where I am alone.
Thank you for listening to Breakthrough Consciousness.
The podcast where we get out of the loop and into it all.
My name is Sean,
And I'm Clayton.
and as your co-host, we're going to be facilitating hearty conversation centered around personal growth.
Whether that be through us sharing our own stories and experiences, or holding space for our guests to share theirs, we're going to tie it all together with lively conversation and hope that you all enjoy. Alrighty, welcome back.
New day, new episode.
Indeed, new week, new episode. But
New month, new episode.
hey,
Welcome back.
Sometimes it be that way. It really do. But that's okay. I'm not beating ourselves up too much.
Hey, what do you guys think about that? You want more content from us on a weekly basis?
I feel like we've been getting into a better groove of things, and with like weekly releases, if not bi-weekly.
Yeah,
And,
it was just impossible with our schedule for the
yeah.
first year of doing the podcast.
For sure. Now
but
I'm finally done with school, which opens me up 3 more nights a week, and
Can we
yeah.
go golf clap up here? Yeah, man, congrats.
Thank you.
That's great news.
Yeah, it's a big weight off. It's almost surreal, to be honest, because it wasn't like, I felt like, going to school, it was going to be this thing I have to like head over heels, like mental charge into. And
Right.
I realized that it was something that I just really allowed to happen. I put about 80% effort towards it without getting like too head over heels, you know what I mean? Just kind
Sure.
of let it happen and move forward with all my steps that I needed to take without letting it overwhelm me or focusing too much on like the end goal.
Right.
And eventually I just kind of like showed up to the end here at the crossroads. It was like, oh, huh, looks like I made it, so I'm gonna keep walking.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a big clearing in your schedule, too. So that's
Yeah.
something to acclimate to. But I'm proud of you. Second, excited.
Yeah,
Super excited,
thank you.
man. Just to see what's on the horizons. Excited to have more time for us to do this.
And to do some other work,
Yeah,
and little
yeah.
business together we've been talking about.
We've been talking off
keep
air
that.
about some good stuff. So we'll definitely let you guys be the first to know once it's official. But
Indeed.
yeah, so this episode we're bringing on
Christopher Leonard, who I actually met through my mom, through a group of like family friends a good number of years ago, and eventually we started running into each other out and about seeing good music together. So a good rekindling to that connection that just has blossomed since. And
Yeah, he was a super cool guy, sweetheart for sure. Honestly, I feel like I had seen him, or maybe we just got into that space where I was just like soul cousin.
yeah, namaste.
But yeah, definitely a good presence to have on the podcast.
No doubt. Very articulated, well-spoken.
Yeah.
And, raw emotion in what he's saying, too. And it's always awesome when you can get that level of vulnerability.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're talking about some heavy topics today, going into just speaking about grief and the process of grieving. So Chris kind of gives his story of his relationship to grief and how that's played out in his life, and we kind of do the same, just kind of echo that. And, there was no outline for this episode. It's very free flowing. Honestly, I would love to do a part 2 with him.
Most definitely. Maybe not necessarily on like the topic of grief, but a lot of like the subtopics that sparked from this episode, and we go through a lot of different conscious wormholes, it seems. And
that can be part 3, because honestly, I would like to do a part 2 on grief, because there are specific questions I would like to ask him that, I sort of was thinking about in the moment, but it was just, we were on a roll, I didn't want to like get too off the flow that we were in. So it was just a very beautiful go with the flow type of conversation.
It most definitely was.
It'd be fun to get more into the weeds of like specifically, methods for dealing with grief and just how, we each have different coping mechanisms, talk about which ones are healthy, which ones are unhealthy, that type of thing. So I think that would be fun. Yeah. Maybe not right away.
No,
but,
most definitely. Yeah, like get this one out there a little bit and mull on it ourselves and feel out like, because like you said, this one was a lot more free flowing. It'd be fun to go into it a little more concise and I think that's the right word I'm looking for, the energy I'm going for here, and dig
Yeah.
up some more answers from within ourselves and share it with each other for sure.
Heck yeah. Well, we'll let everyone else get tuned into what we're talking about here. So, on with the episode.
It's such a topic that everyone can kind of relate to. I know you guys talked a lot about Ram Dass with Patrick, and that's great. I mean, that is definitely one of the central figures of this whole thing for me. You know,
For a lot of people.
Yeah, and he caught me at such like a pivotal time in my life.
Yeah.
So
Every time.
Yeah, I was like 16, and that's when my dad passed away from cancer, and like that is the crazy thing about grief is that it's not you know, they try to define it in like this neat way. There's like the 5 stages of grief, right? And you've got like anger and denial and whatever. And it makes it sound like this neat package of stuff, and it's not. It doesn't hit you all at once, or some people it does hit you all at once, and everybody absorbs it so differently. But and then you think you've got a handle on it, and it can be like 10 years later, and you like drop a coffee cup, and it triggers something in your mind, and
yeah, it's like the healing's never totally done, right?
Never.
Sometimes it's just like this cycle. Like you kind of come back to this like square one. And you're like, all right, well, I'm definitely in a different spot. I can come to it with a different perspective, but now that hurt's kind of always going to be there. It's just how we relate to it.
It's one thing I really do appreciate about how life seems to naturally work is one issue never seems to be pressed for too long unless we mentally milk it.
Yeah.
Life has its way of naturally taking us around and around to each of these points for periods of time to work through and work through. We might think that we worked through it, and then, oh, look, we're back here again, remembering these lessons, remembering the pain and the hurt that might have been caused from whatever experience is, but through a whole different storyline almost, and in similar ways that relates to whatever might be going on in our life to whatever the experience was in the past, and to work through it a little more, but it never seems to stay for too long. I'm moving on to the next thing, and I feel like it's just kind of common now to feel like, oh, hey, here again. And
yeah, and it's so counter to our, and I don't know if this is universal to everyone, but I think we want to compartmentalize so much of our life, our emotions, and how we experience things, and nail them down in that way. And like you said, like it is a continual thing.
Yeah, that's actually what I was thinking when you were first saying that about they say the 5 stages of grief. I can't even think of what they are right now because I never really gave it that much value. You know what I mean? But it's definitely just that.
It's not a linear process.
Right. It's that aspect of humanity that's so rampant in our culture right now that's trying to put everything in order. You know, which is like good to a degree, but on the other hand, it's like, what about the surrendering to the mystery and like, you know, surrendering to the flow of thing and trusting? You know, we're always compulsively like trying to put things in boxes and you are this, I am this, these labels, these identities, you know.
And resisting change. And I think that is like,
as a byproduct of it, for
sure.
sure.
I think it's part of why it's so hard for us to grieve other people is because we're so resistant to change. And not just even like, it's a whole separate thing that it reminds us of our mortality too. And I think that,
especially when it comes to that kind of loss.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
It depends on how you look at it, if you consider it loss or not. But
well, it was easy for me that first one in my personal experience, you know, because my dad had his first heart attack when I was 12. So it was easier with him because when you watch somebody struggle and you watch somebody go through like the throes of cancer and like chemo and losing something, it's easier because you're like, oh, they're in a better place. They're not fighting it anymore. But to be 16, and I remember vividly, we had like a room in our house where the computer was, and because he had such a hard time getting in and out of bed, there was a futon in there that he would sleep on. And he started the conversation with me one night, I think I'm gonna die. And, you know, to be at that place in your life, and I it's hard to work through certain regrets in your life, but you're not prepared for that at 16. You're not prepared to sit and talk with somebody about their fear of dying. And
you're
especially
at such a different stage in your life,
yeah,
in your development.
And we so much want to look at our parents as these people who have it all together,
Right.
who understand so much about life and everything that
they're the sun and the moon, you know, as an infant.
Absolutely.
They're your world.
Yeah, when you were born, they were handed a manual that told them exactly how to raise children.
They had the answers to every question.
Yeah. And so that was an easy one for me because I was like, oh, he fought so hard. He went through all this stuff. And even almost like there was a selfish quality to it that now that I'm older and have given myself a bit more leeway on some of this stuff, that we were like, oh, dear God, you know, when you're taking care of somebody for so long, caretaker syndrome is a real thing, you know? When you're helping somebody out like that it's taxing on your mind and your body. Your life revolves at a certain point around doctor's visits and things like that. It was the first time in years that me and my mom had looked at each other and just breathed this deep sigh, like when we woke up that morning and like the death rattle was over, that heavy breathing was over, and we looked at each other and we were just like, we don't have to do this anymore. He doesn't have to do this anymore. And I kind of
relief to a certain extent.
Yeah, but it's such a guilty, bittersweet relief. You can't to be like happy that somebody's gone, and maybe happy is not the best.
You're happy.
Right, exactly. It's more complicated than that.
Happy that the suffering has ceased.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that is why like talking about grief with other people and everything is so important, because now we've got so many people that are dying so young from these drugs and stuff. I don't know, like that Mac Miller album just came out this week, right? Somebody who's taken way too young, and listening to that is so hard. You hear somebody with so much talent, had so much life ahead of them, and I think people just like don't know how to deal with death.
No, absolutely.
There is no easy way to do it, and nobody wants to talk about it because it is such a bummer, right?
Well, it's the culture that we're in that makes it a bummer, that makes it that no one wants to talk about it because no one has any answers. But here's the thing, some people do. You know, there are some cultures, there are some, you know, waves of thought that have more mature relationships.
So much more of a
death.
celebration than a grievance or a process like that.
Yeah.
Like celebrating the moving on from this world into others. In some cultures, you know, what is it? It's not Planet Earth. It's one of the new Earth documentaries. It was on Netflix, but it was showing one particular culture in Asia that mummifies all of the ones that have moved on and brings them out for a ceremony every year to celebrate and take pictures with them and party with all of them. Like they're still here and remembering them as they were physically. And like it's just a whole different shock to the ideas that we here in the western part of the world, Americas and whatnot, like see death as this huge loss, I feel like more commonly than it is like a stepping stone into being something potentially more than
recognizing that soul carries on, like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. You know, they sit and they read this to people because they recognize that that's not a endpoint. That's not. It's just a transition into another step.
Just one lily pad.
Yeah. Or even if I'm not speaking anything specific, but I'm sure that there are also some people that might not necessarily feel convicted that life goes on after death, as in like personal ego, you know, your individuated consciousness going on, but just the aspect of celebrating life rather than it being this, oh man, dwelling on the ending, the period. What about the whole story? You know, like that doesn't disappear. That lives on in our memories and in our heart and our consciousness and in our imaginations, which could be said in that sense that it's still present, you know, it's still a truth. It's just, you know, the same way that the memory of a dream is this elusive truth. You know what I mean? But I mean, I happen to be in the camp that does believe that spirit carries on.
Oh,
but
yeah.
just
I mean,
throwing that
even
out there.
scientifically, essentially, has it been proven? Is it law or is it just theory? But I'm pretty sure it's been proven now. Energy itself doesn't die. It doesn't just disappear. This
Yeah.
little bit of life force translates into something
Mm-hmm.
once we pass. So, have you ever read how they've weighed bodies after someone
Weighed 'em?
passes?
Oh.
Yeah, and there's like less weight within the body from the time of like, which also
I've never
could be
heard that.
because, people release their bowels and whatnot when they
Yeah.
pass. But,
There was
They
like a
probably
little-
account for that.
Yeah.
though.
yeah.
Makes
But
sense.
yeah, there's this weight of the spirit, or so they say. I know that you could like Google that and find some topics, find some articles, and you know what I mean, actual information on that. But I've
Well,
taken
7 pounds. I think that's what. So like, there was a Will Smith movie in the early 20s or late 90s, and I think it was called 7 pounds or 9 pounds, and that was supposed to be like that estimated weight of the difference.
Oh.
And that was like a big part of what that movie centered around was. But you can feel that. You can.
Real quick, is it a good movie?
If I was, yeah.
yeah, but
It was good because it brought that idea up
Yeah,
and it
that's
had
what I
a
was
bigger
curious.
thing, like how well they executed that.
Okay.
I don't know.
Fair enough,
But
fair
if you
enough.
sit with people who are dying, you feel that,
Yeah.
that
and-
weight lift, the weight of life
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
It carries some gravity, boys and girls.
Yes,
It's dense.
so much of that. Ram Dass had like a whole period of his life where that was his thing. He would like sit with dying people because it is such a trip. How much growth happens in that last month or week or several hours before you pass, it is wild. And while we can sit back and like somebody can call that pseudoscience, the spirit leaving the body and the weight of it, it's a very much like a tangible experience when you're there to spot it.
Mm-hmm.
It's undeniable. There's countless stories of people being in that scenario, and like the amount of growth that happens as you're like catapulted out of this plane into the next one can be astonishing.
Absolutely.
The level of acceptance I feel like it takes to not cling on to physical life so much,
But people want you to. That's the hardest thing about
'Cause of
being
their
somebody who's dying, is that everyone around you says
No, don't
you're
go.
gonna be okay.
Yeah, instead of it's okay.
Yeah. What in our most vulnerable part of our life, people want to lie to you, which is like astonishing. You say you're going to be okay, this is going to be fine, when really if we could have that honesty with each other and ourselves to be like, it's going to be okay, but it's going to be okay because this is going to happen. We all know we're going to die, and to celebrate that.
Yeah. And in a certain sense, recognizing that we've all died before, not necessarily in like a reincarnation sense, but like
Here in this life, like
You have
Yeah.
to
It happens.
surrender. You gotta die.
You're not
to
gonna
yourself.
grow if you don't let go of those
Yeah.
parts of yourself. I'm getting emotional over here. This is beautiful, and I just appreciate you coming on to
man,
speak
for
on
sure.
this.
Yeah.
Mhm. Potent topic for
It
sure.
really is, and that letting go is just so important to the whole process. And I feel like letting go really can just translate directly to what grievance is. It's
Yeah.
the process of letting go,
Mm-hmm.
and
Absolutely.
observing it. It is the observation of letting go, which is our grievances, allowing ourselves to have that space to move on from those painful memories, experiences, and
Yeah, man.
equivalent to kind of like forgiveness, like we've talked about in a recent episode with Patrick.
So much of that paralleled this too. That, and then listening to you guys talk about like the depression and stuff, because when you go through enough of this and you see people in the throes of grief, and it's what do you say to somebody? What do you say to somebody as they're going through that? And once again,
And do you need to say something?
yeah.
You know?
Being there, I feel like for me, like if I'm in that space of grieving, like just having someone that I can put a foot on or arm on, rest my head on, like just look at you from across the room.
Share the room with.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I could sit here and bawl my eyes out over not even in a sad way, just over the letting go of any energy or something part of my life. Like, just have someone there, present, like, to be an observer to that process, I feel like is so therapeutic.
To share the experience and to know that you're not alone with your feelings. I think that's what's so important.
Yeah.
We're all human. And
I think that, again, kind of a shadow of our culture, and I'm not trying to be the guy over here shitting on American culture, but there are things that we need to grow in, and this is
Culture
one
in
of them.
general.
We're a young
society.
nation at
Yeah,
the end of
that's-
the day, and we have to accept like we haven't had as much time to think about these things like
Right.
with that cultural collective brain.
Mhm.
We haven't had the time to do the work that maybe other cultures have.
We're still in the throes of it. You know,
Yeah.
as a culture, we're not even in puberty yet, so we got to be
Yeah.
patient with each other.
I
and
was
with
just about to say, I
ourselves,
feel
yeah.
like puberty hit hard.
Yeah. That's a
As a
death.
nation,
Yeah,
yeah.
as a nation.
You think we've already gone through that? Well, whatever. Let's not get into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But my
Let's
point
analyze.
was that it reveals a shadow of our culture in the sense that we're so mental.
Yeah.
We think we need to say something, but like almost because we're uncomfortable to share that space with other people, we're
Yeah.
uncomfortable as a culture to be in our feelings, to be present to our emotions. So we're always trying to talk about it, you know.
And
Tell them
people-
it's okay, make them feel better, you know.
Yeah.
To
People
be-
want to force you into a space too. Like
Yeah.
when you know, I remember, people want to call in and check on you. And in that aftershock, me personally, like when I lost my father, or even when I was older in life, I was 23, I lost my mother. People want to force you into what they think your grieving process should be like. Getting phone calls from people, and once you gain cancer, so there was stuff leading up to it. There was chemo, there was those hardships, and people
Jeez.
calling on the phone and they say, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's all right. I knew this was gonna happen. This was part of it." And it'll hit you later. Later, it'll hit you later. You'll be
Oh my God.
sad,
What?
or like, people want to force you, into their idea of what grieving should be
Mhm.
like.
Sounds like because you're not living up to their expectation of
Yeah.
where you should
Yeah,
be.
it seems like such an
Yeah.
odd thing to say. to
Well,
someone.
yeah, and I mean,
don't know.
people are better at maybe I'm like misrepresenting that notion of how it comes across, but
I know what you mean,
it's
though, yeah.
I've talked to other people who've been through the same thing, and they're like, yeah, you're for a while, like you're still processing it, also you're not like shattered by it or anything.
Yeah.
And it hits them sideways. I've always anytime I get around more than 5 people, I like step into this ham personality where I want to entertain, and to play that at a parent's funeral is you hit people sideways. You hit people sideways when you're like laughing and trying to celebrate life, like you were saying, trying to have those moments. And that's always the best. Anytime that you've gone to a funeral and you've heard somebody crack a joke, like, thank God. It's so necessary.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just made me think of a personal experience. I don't know.
Lay it
that I
on
should
me. Yeah.
necessarily share it on the podcast, but I'll share it with you guys.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah.
My aunt died of cancer when I was probably like 14 or something.
Yeah.
And maybe younger, actually. I think I was in junior high or something. And I just remember at the funeral, like, the service happened, and then my cousin came over, and I was just like, you okay? And I just felt like she like kind of laughed it off. And it was really like surprising to me. And I get it, it's like an awkward thing. Like I felt awkward saying something to her. But again, it was like I just wanted to do something to let her
You
know
wanted
that
to
I
be
give a
there.
shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like to let her know that I care. And I don't remember her response other than feeling like she evaded the question with some kind of humor.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, made me like, I was just kind of taken aback by it. I was just like, oh wow, is she not facing this, or
Yeah.
just not right here, right now? That's just not, she doesn't need to break
think-
down right now. So again, like you
Yeah.
said, people have expectations.
You
And just
have to,
gotta
and those
roll with
scars
it,
are new.
yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to find a way to I wish we could all be that person, but it is hard to just bawl every time that
Yeah.
somebody has that conversation with you. You have to a wound has to, almost like scar over before it can heal, and to protect you to be able to do that work. And I think that is where the real work lies in grieving. It's not that first smack of it, it's to start like pulling it open afterwards. Once you've gotten through the service or the freshness of it, to start and peel back those layers and understand, because that's where a lot of people seem to get held up in the grieving process, is that fineness. So they want to hold on to that fineness, and they want to not start to open back into that emotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, yeah, my dad died when I was less than 1 year old.
Wow.
So I kind of always have felt kind of a self-criticism of myself, in the sense that I've always felt like I'm kind of have a callous kind of perspective about death. And obviously in my adulthood, I feel like I've matured my relationship to death. It's not so much of something that I just don't want to like, oh, well, people die. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like a heartless, like, but it's also, there's an element of truth to it, of just realness. Death is a part of life.
Absolutely.
But is that,
to not let it jade you.
Yeah, exactly. And like just having an understanding of your own relationship with these things, with your own grieving process, and where you are in that trajectory.
Yeah.
That journey. I mean, now I feel like I have a totally different perspective, and I am still a little callous, if you will, when it comes to this, when I hear people maybe talking about their grieving, because I can't open my heart to every single experience of trauma, just because it any trauma that we go through, we do kind of build up a scar and a shield, so that we don't have to feel that sense of vulnerable pain every time we talk about death or whatever, and I mean, in that sense, I feel like, especially a parental death, don't you feel like that kind of like sort of catapults your personal development? You kind of like grow up a little faster than you wanted to, maybe.
Yeah, and I think that is because every time you have that conversation, the first words out of somebody's mouth, I'm so sorry, and I don't know how I would handle that. I think it's Sarah Silverman quote, right? So she lost her dad like in the middle of a tour, and it tore her apart, and she said that there's two kinds of people, that there's people who have experienced the loss of a parent, and there's people who have no idea the hell that they're going to go through. Because it changes the lens with which you view the world. And that's something, even though this has been, 5 and 10, 12 years since both of these experiences, that you see people with their parents, or like just the idea of like people who have grandparents that are still alive.
Yeah.
Like I don't even think about that. People talk about like going to see their grandparents. I'm like, oh wow, like that's neat. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it changes the way that you see people's relationships with other people. I think that's one of the hardest things I deal with other people is their frustrations with their own parents and the way they look at their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so it brings you gratitude. It brings you gratitude for life and stuff. And then death is something that, like you said, like we're going to approach in cycles, and each of us are going to have to develop a relationship with it at different times. You can make it into your late 30s without experiencing like an extreme loss of somebody close to you. And I don't know if those people are better off for having developed all of that life experience beforehand to deal with that death. Or I don't know if maybe
it's all
like,
individual, right?
Yeah.
We're on different journeys.
Exactly.
But there's no denying that it definitely ages you. And that not in like a physical, like negative way.
Yeah.
But I feel like
You
it
have
matures you.
Yeah, emotionally.
Yeah.
Emotional maturation. That's what I wanted to say about everything in general. It sounds like from having experienced a lot of what you both have gone through, it has sparked like a skyrocket boost towards emotional maturation and being able to handle the world as it comes. And as far as people being like, oh, well, it'll hit you later, like, maybe it's because not to say they're not emotionally mature, but maybe they just don't have that level of emotional maturity to where they couldn't process it and handle it without fully breaking down entirely, you know?
Mhm.
So I feel like it is less people that are at a level where they can handle such an extreme thing than there are people that can't and that do take it in a much harder, more almost like self-corrosive way that eats
Yeah.
that shit, you know, take a loss personally.
And at the same time, like, I can sit here and I can talk to you guys all day about, like, the death of my parents, but I've got a cat that I lost 2 years ago that, like, I bawl my eyes every time I think about it.
Yeah,
Because
I feel you.
that's, like, the strangeness and weirdness and trippiness of this grief-death relationship is that, like, it is so weird and it all, like, hits you in weird ways.
Mm-hmm. And we're not in control of it. And I think that's the key. And that's why it's so hard to experience a death of a loved one.
Yeah.
Because you realize that life is out of your control.
And that's this whole journey that, like,
Yeah.
we're on this whole consciousness thing that I think that's one of the big center points of it is accepting a lack of control, learning to live without that, because the sooner you can, the better everything is going to be for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you can't force it. It can't be like, all right, well, I'm surrendering to the universe. Fuck this shit, you know? Like, you
Yeah.
never
I'm surrendering. Did you hear me?
It has to be from a place of trust to be true.
Yeah.
You know, it can't just be like, well, I guess I have no other choice. You
And
know,
also a
it's-
place of continuing to move forward, because you can't just, okay, I'm accepting and allowing now. Where's it at? Where's the next step? You know,
Mhm.
can't just hope that the river takes you away. You gotta swim into the current.
Yeah, yeah. And if it isn't trust, maybe just a little bit of a leap of faith, you know, a small seedling of faith that trust will become embodied in your experience, you know.
Absolutely. You guys talked about this idea of purpose with Patrick on a couple of a couple of podcasts ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that death can be a real big obstacle for people in trying to understand that idea of a purpose, or that life, to trust life and to trust the process. You say, well, oh, how can I trust this process when this is the kind of things that it does to me?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can be a big part of an obstacle to a more whole consciousness for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it just goes to show that there are different phases in this journey of experiencing a human life, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To put it in silly esoteric terms, but like I'll just use, again, I can only speak for myself. You know, the way that my dad's death affected me, you know, I didn't ever really know my dad as an ego, because I wasn't really an ego yet, you know?
Yeah.
I was just this body that
They call me Sean.
I didn't even know that, man.
True.
I mean, I was like 9 months old. Like, I was just I
You
cry,
are
I
such a
feel. You know what I mean?
sponge at
Exactly,
that.
exactly. That's what we are when we're
Yeah.
that small of a human animal. You know, we're just being conditioned by our environment. And when half of my environment, you know, half of my emotional and biological connection like disappeared, obviously that's gonna have an imprint on my personality. So I went most of my life just kind of having this like sense of, you know, just lack of self-worth. You know, it wasn't like I hated myself or anything, but I just kind of always was like shy dude, you know, just kind of
Yeah.
lower self-esteem. Like I said, I wasn't necessarily self-loathing all the time, but there was
Yeah.
some of that too, you know, whatever. So, you know, through my process, like the reason why I have truly integrated this experience of trust in my life, like I feel like that's my number one like spiritual merit badge in my life right now is like trust. That's like the one thing I got. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I'm not the bravest, I'm not the wisest, but I got trust, you know?
Yeah.
And the reason why that is because on magic mushrooms, I had this experience of just meditating in the sun, and it just felt like it suddenly dawned on me that everything happens for a reason. You know, that was the quote, you know, but that's kind of, I don't necessarily like putting it in those terms, but it was just this recognition that, you know what, I do forgive my dad, you know, what he did or what happened to him. Like I would be a totally different person if that hadn't happened. So it's just like, it's just surrendering and being
Yeah.
grateful for that I am who I am because of everything that's happened so far. And
Yeah.
it might have been painful. It might have been, trudging through the mud. It might have been, getting lost in the clouds, forgetting the sun even exists. All those experiences that we all go through in whatever phase of our life that we do. But at some point we get to the moment of clarity of like, oh my God, all of that needed to happen.
It's a heavy curriculum,
Yeah,
right? That's
yeah.
what Ram Dass said. We, some of us, we get just handed bigger and harder classes to take to get us where we need to go.
Yeah, totally. And there's some people that have more of a experiential belief in reincarnation and the whole souls choosing to come to Earth for lessons and to live out karma or to experience I don't necessarily have that experience, but
Nah.
so many people do. I entertain its possibility.
And there is the school of thought that life here on Earth itself is just a big school
Right.
for all of these energies or souls to incarnate on and learn lessons essentially for the growth of consciousness. And I like the idea, the sound, the feeling of that one feels right. But who am I to say exactly how it works either?
But even if it's just new life and the idea of dying to yourself, even if it's just the idea, I think that we almost like reincarnate in ways multiple times in this one life on Earth, that we become new, fresh people all the time. We literally shed our skin. Every part of our body becomes new almost.
Our cells don't even stay around our whole life.
Yeah, physically, and then if physically, so below as above type of stuff. Like if it's happening physically, you got to imagine it. Hopefully, it's happening emotionally and
Consistent
spiritually.
and constant rebirth.
Yeah.
Which is, diet's important. Well,
Mental diet as well.
Yeah, I mean, all of it. Anything that we ingest is most likely what we are becoming.
Absolutely, yeah. It's that input output.
I haven't experienced the loss of a parent, or I lost a friend and a pet, my dog. That was the hardest so far. I've lost aunts, uncles,
The
great
pets are
grandparents,
hard.
and it was easier letting go of those closer family members, the human family members, than it was my family dog of so long, for sure. And I know for a fact it's not going to be a cakewalk when I do lose a parent. Like, I'm here talking about it now, but the reason I'm not chiming in a whole lot is I haven't reached that bigger level of grief that I feel like you guys are able to relate on a little bit more. And I know I've made a lot of losses as far as like letting go of parts of myself over time, and whole friend groups, friends, moving on from situations or, drugs, things like that, grieving parts of myself that just weren't good or beneficial to my humanity.
Letting go of lower versions of yourself.
For sure. And right now, letting go of, the anxiety that I'm causing by thinking too much, what it'll be like to grieve that. I'm not there yet. I haven't been faced with that yet. And
if anything, like, isn't it just an opportunity and a reason to be that much more joyful and grateful for the time that you have with your family?
Where I'm at with this breath now is, feeling grateful and honored and blessed to be where I'm at and to hear you guys share what has helped you, because I know this is going to help me for sure, and it is helping me, so thank you.
Absolutely.
I was grateful for it brought me a lot of it, as crazy as it sounds, it brought me a lot of closure to have that second opportunity. I mentioned having some regrets when I was younger, to not be there in a better way for my father when he went through this. I closed off. I did what I had to do to keep moving. I shut down certain parts of that relationship. And there's that regret of, man, I wish I would have had more time to ask more questions. What was growing up like for you? And what were all these things? And then so to have a healthy amount of time to digest how I felt about that. And obviously, like, a lot of that growth came through the use of different entheogens and stuff, and through stuff like Ram Dass, and being able to forgive myself and accept my limitations of what I could do in that moment and what I couldn't do in that moment, and how I could and couldn't be there for him. And so when my mother got to that point where she was passing, it gave me that whole new chance. I got a whole new opportunity to try to be there for somebody in the best way that I could, to talk to her about like what I had learned through Ram Dass and other teachers about dying and about identifying more with the witness and not with yourself and your body. And that work is so important, not just in dealing with grief exclusively. All these things tie together, they're a web. And in this idea of not identifying with your body, you don't have to mourn that physical loss is bad. And I in no way was in a position to be the superior guru to her. You know, I didn't have that like fallacy of idea, but I was able to talk to her about these things. She taught me so much in that time too. The ways that she would reclaim her life on a day-to-day basis. It ended up not being cancer that took her. It ended up being a kidney failure, which is a whole deal. Like anybody who has to go through that, that's a whole process. You got to do dialysis several times a week. You give away so much of your life. Your liquid intake changes, and to watch the ways that she would like find ways to reclaim her life, like this is what I'm gonna do because I can do it, was so inspiring to me. And to to feel like I was helping her through that death was great for me, and it was that new chance to not that I view them as wrongs, the things that happened with my father, but it was that new chance to like work on that. And I think that is the important thing. You know, you said like I haven't gone through any of these big deaths, but all these little losses and all these little griefs, you're learning from them. And as long as you are open to those lessons, don't dismiss those deaths. You know, the death of a dog or whatever. Don't dismiss that. That's just as important as these big losses. And it's all like a muscle that you flex and you become.
You strengthen this letting go muscle.
Yeah.
Your let goer.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pet death has come up a few times, and it's kind of synchronistic because I don't know, I've just been like really cherishing my time with my cat. You know, like I kind of just have noticed or just realized, wow, she's not going to be around forever, you know, and she's so freaking like lovable and loving, like the most affectionate, you know, and it's just like what you said about, you know, having maybe a different mourning experience between, you know, some loss and then with your, did you say it was a cat or a dog?
Yeah, cat, yeah.
I think part of that is that different relationships reflect different aspects of ourselves. You know what I mean? Like for me and my cat, like she found me. You know what I mean? Like my parents birthed me. My brothers and sisters were along for the ride. You know what I mean? Like we didn't choose each other, but like my cat chose me on a like metaphysical level. Like she came into my life, you know. And just the serendipity of that, and it's just a really precious connection, and it's more of a like interpersonal too.
Yeah, and it's such an emotional connection. It's not at all analytical like a lot of human relationships are. Right. It's not just a mental thing. It's a emotional bond that we form with pets, and you know, it's a lot more common to have that kind of emotional bond with animals since there isn't that whole extra level of you know, filter essentially.
I'm not asking you if you're okay. You know, but just being there in the right moments.
Me too, girl.
And I think you have a sense of responsibility too when it's something like an animal.
Your child.
Know? Yeah, they are your child. They are. You have. Baby. Yeah. You have got a sense of responsibility for their care and their well-being. And so, even though we know it is this inevitable thing, I think we feel a sense of failure sometimes towards people and animals when we're not giving them what they need or the unfortunate life events happen to them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that maybe it's just like a trigger. You know, I think maybe that's that experience maybe triggering like a belief system that maybe was a little bit subconscious, you know, and it's just kind of bringing that to light, and it's giving you a reason to process that belief, you know, and asking yourself, is this really true?
Yeah.
Is it true that I could have done something different with, you know, that I could have had a different conversation with your dad or something like that, or that you could have done something different with any relationship? I mean, ultimately, I believe that people are doing the best they can in every moment. You know,
and do
even
those thoughts serve you?
Yeah, exactly.
That looking back and wondering what you could or couldn't have done.
It's a mental game.
Yeah.
Nothing more.
That's always how I try to like evaluate some of the stuff I put myself through. Does that serve you? Or is it making you a better person to look back and think, well, could I have done this better? If it serves you and it makes you better, ride that out.
Right. Because it might give you the impetus to do better in the future. And if so, good. If not, it's just self-loathing at that point, right?
Right.
Which has no real value other than being an experience to work through, you know, to let go. But speaking of let go, have you experienced ego death in any sense of the word?
Oh man, I always question that, you know, because I think I have, and I can recount these experiences, and then I will get struck again by it, and wonder like, oh, was that last one really the death? Or people talk about this idea of breakthroughs, and people like want to. Everybody's breakthrough. Yeah, I think I have, but here I am still, and
different thresholds.
Yeah,
different
layers to it. How would we function without an ego? Here, we'd be amorphous blobs taking in, receiving all energy and giving it all out, and not having any sense of individuality or function. So.
Well, I didn't mean that the ego dies and stays dead.
Oh, I know.
It was more
that.
what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, like a ego death as far as shedding the layers of self and transformation and moving into like a whole new like paradigm essentially, or state of being.
Yeah.
Or a psychedelic experience where you literally believe that you have died, but then you don't.
Yeah.
You know, you wake up from that dream.
My most recent mushroom experience was, man, I wish I could have fun on mushrooms, guys. I can't. Every time I take them, it is like, and every other psychedelic I handle well, I tolerate well, but there's something like reserved for mushrooms with me where they like physically like shut down parts of my body. I spent a good 4 hours like hovering over a toilet, purging, and like thinking in my head, like whiting out, and like thinking about like, well, you know, my wife will do a good job taking care of my child. Like, it'll be all right without me. Like, literally accepting my death, and that, like, in very much a physical way of, like, I'm dying right now. Something in my stomach has exploded. Maybe it's appendicitis. Maybe I've been drinking too many Rockstar energy drinks. But I'm dying right now.
The story's unraveling.
Yeah.
Mushrooms and Rockstar.
Yeah. I always imagined it as a much more spiritual thing. You know, I've had that where it's like fading off into the white light, becoming disconnected from your body and everything, but never an actual, like, I'm physically dying right now.
Yeah.
Every part of my body is shutting down, and, feeling that, like, oh, I have so many people that I need to take care of. I can't do this, but they're strong. They'll handle it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did.
Yeah, that's ego death right there.
Yeah. I think
at least
so.
the brink of it.
Yeah.
It's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
It's hard to have a finite idea or definition on what ego death is.
Or even what ego is.
Yeah. I mean,
or even what death is.
Definitely hot terms.
Yeah. Everyone's got a different definition of ego, that's for sure.
How about you? Have either of you guys had an ego death experience that you could?
Oh, just recently.
That's why I was thinking about it.
On a hefty dosage of hash oil. Just a friend offered it to me, being friendly, and I was like, sure, you know, why not? And I took it all in at once, cough, 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 big heavy hitter, like 15 clouds of smoke later. And I'm sitting down thinking, oh man, this is it. This is the moment where it all happens. And, all I could really do was accept it, because I couldn't even bring up the courage or energy to have words come out of my mouth. I was in such a mental space, this cerebral zone of thought loop, that this is it. This is when it's gonna happen. And that built up, and anxiety and paranoia and all of its cousins and sisters, brothers, uncles, and all the whole freaking family was terrorizing in my brain for a little while. And I just felt totally overloaded to the point where I accepted it, and I moved out of those thoughts mentally. And as soon as I did that, I started having those physical feelings of like, oh my God, I'm dying. It feels like my heart's about to stop. And then I literally, it was like electric to my brain, and I felt like I was going to have an aneurysm or something.
Oh, God.
And, I love cannabis. I love THC. I enjoy it. It's a lovely medicine in many ways in my life. But I realize I definitely overdo it sometimes, and that was one of those times where it took full acceptance of, okay, I'm gonna die here. Like, whether I live or die, all is well. It'll be fine. Everything is okay as it is. And as soon as I was in that level of acceptance, and it's like, ego death might be synonymous with letting go of like the grips of fear, essentially.
Yeah. Do you think that outside of like that experience, do you think you're scared of death? Like, how do you feel about death? Like,
I feel pretty good about death most days.
Yeah.
But I have this like subconscious fear about it for sure. There are things that I do to make sure that I avoid sometimes like silly situations that could result in me dying for some reason.
Fear.
Right.
Yeah.
Physiological.
And I've had psychedelic experiences where I could have sworn that all of my favorite people were there to sacrifice me. Because one time I had this experience, again on a big old dab, where I literally closed my eyes and then witnessed like 5 or 6 of my best friends stabbing me.
Yeah.
And that's like ridiculous and crazy, right? Like, like, oh, watch out for this guy, is whacked out. But
yeah,
it was a freaking
vulnerability, when you're putting yourself in those intense psychedelic states, you are ultimately like making yourself vulnerable. When you go to an event or wherever and you ingest enough of this stuff, you are offering yourself up there. And if you're not, then I hate to say it, but like, I don't think you're going to have these sort of transcendent experiences if you can't create that vulnerability.
That's very true.
And I don't know how that was for you, but maybe that was that idea of like, I'm so done for that somebody could do whatever they wanted to me right now.
That's pretty much where it was. But like the fact that I saw it like visually, that instilled a big like kind of like fear seed a little bit. Something that has taken a lot more conscious effort to pluck out.
Yeah.
So I've had like a psychedelic experience or two that led to me for a brief moment having such a high level of fear that I think I was going to get like sacrificed by friends. And then it's always after the moment of letting go of that fear that it's like, that's the breakthrough moment. You lift the veil of that fear and you enter into the wholeness of experience. And being in that moment, in the moment, if you will.
Yeah.
And moving on. So like, for me, ego death has happened many times, and almost every time what I would consider ego death is like that letting go of fear, accepting what's going on, and stepping into a more conducive presence of self in the world.
Just makes me think of the symbolism of like Christ consciousness versus ego. It's like that sacrificing yourself for the good of humanity or whatever. It's literally sacrificing the ego. Yeah. To be born again into the oneness of consciousness. The
letting
unity.
go of whether or not you feel like you're going to physically survive to maintain some sort of peace in the spirit and the whole spectrum.
Yeah, that just sounds like a story within that symbolism.
Absolutely. I took 10 years probably of heavy dosages of different psychotropic substances to feel that ego death for me, because I always thought, like, I'm not really afraid of dying. Like, I've seen it happen. It's fine. Like, when you die, like, it's not that scary. And I think it has taken me getting older and owing that sense of responsibility to other people, my wife, my child, to have enough of a responsibility where I'm like, yeah, like, I'm afraid of dying. Like, my work's not done. Mm-hmm. And obviously, I think people can be held back by that fear, but I think at the same time, that can be really good for you. It can be a catalyst.
Motivation for self-care and,
and doing your work.
Yeah.
Because, I think that's where the real dread and anxiety comes from, knowing that you're not done.
Yes.
But thinking that life is going to end you before your work is done.
Yes.
Because we do have purpose here. We create it. We create that purpose, and it's real.
and how hard are you working towards that, on a day-to-day
daily
basis.
level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you
How
wanna-
clear are you about it? Yeah.
I would like to say though, for the first time ever during one of those like shedding of fear, I had this moment where I was like, I've done some good things. And which was,
That's beautiful, yeah.
I haven't had that ever an experience like that. It's always been like I've got so much more work to do to become this person I know I am.
Yeah.
But like I got a lot more work if I want to see a ripple. And for the first time ever having this kind of like fearful experience, like through my acceptance, I had a little tiny glimpse of you done some good.
Yeah.
I was like, I have. There's still a lot more to do, but like that was cool. Because every other time it's been like, all right, now get to work. This time it was like, you're doing good. Get to work.
It's like you're on your path. Keep going.
Yeah, it was really cool.
That's awesome.
Not at the beginning, not at the end.
Yeah,
Keep rolling.
I don't even think we made it to the middle yet.
Yeah. Ain't even reached puberty yet.
Yeah, puberty.
But no, to answer your question, I haven't really experienced ego death in like the traditional psychedelic trajectory. I mean, I already mentioned the magic mushroom experience. That was the first time I did psychedelics at all, and had a very enlightening experience that I feel like I was able to bring something home and integrate that into my life. And I've had other powerful experiences since then, but none that have really been that transformative, But the same day that I did magic mushrooms the first time, there was also salvia going around the woods. So so here's the story. So I kind of always felt a fear about psychedelics because I knew that this stuff with my dad, I knew I had some darkness in me that I needed to process, and I wasn't, it's like the hero's journey, it's like you're gonna accept the call, you got some stuff to go through, but are you brave enough yet or what? So I was like, and then my friend let me be here now,
Right.
and that was prior to that trip. And so that just made me feel like really like encouraged. I was like, yes, okay, so this is medicine. It can be medicine. I'm going to go into it with like, that type of intention where I wanted something to be revealed to me. I wanted to work through my shit. I never really have looked at psychedelics as something to have fun on.
No.
Personally, that's not been my relationship with it. So anyway, I had the magic mushroom experience, and it was just like, it was all good. Like, it was like, I felt like I was in nirvana. Like, that was an ego death, actually, now that I think about it. I did have an ego death, but I kind of like skipped the dying part. And was just straight in these clouds of like, cosmic consciousness where I was like, wow, this is so fun. But then my ego started coming online. I was like, whoa, this is so familiar. But like, oh, what's my voice? Who am I? And then I was like, okay, I'm Sean tripping. Let's fucking have some fun. That was that. And
what a spark.
Yeah.
I think there's got to be fun too. That was a big deal for me. I definitely carried that mentality through the beginning of my experiences with these things. Is like, this isn't fun, this is work, and could be a bit preachy at times with people and how they chose to apply these substances to their life. I think it can be fun too. It can be fun. It can be work, and I think those fun work boundaries are fun to cross. They're fun to play with.
I think
It's fun to do the work.
Yeah,
It is. It should be.
Exactly.
I think that I've got a lot of respect for these like monastic folks that lock themselves in caves for weeks and do their work that way. But at the end of the day, like if these lessons that you want to bring home with you, you want to apply to your everyday life, then like it has to all correlate in a way, and like it can't
be an isolated occurrence where you're the only Buddha on Earth that becomes enlightened in a cave.
Yeah.
It can be, sure, you can do anything you want on Earth. But, I feel like if you go out there and have that enlightening experience, like it's proper to come back to the marketplace and share that with the community and integrate it. And that's the whole Bodhisattva thing. Are you familiar?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that idea kind of like helps prevent like a lot of the spiritual materialism that is so rampant in this scene.
Definitely.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of reaching these new peaks and plateaus in consciousness and kind of trying to like position others against yourself with where they're at on their path and realizing that there's nothing better or worse about one or the other. But yeah, about that like bodhisattva and applying it all to your life. I listened to Hamilton Morris talked about ayahuasca, and you know, so many people like they go off to the jungle and they do ayahuasca, and that's great. That's the ceremonial ritual way to like have these experiences. And I think it sounds like a beautiful idea to go out in the middle of the woods and have these experiences and bring something back. But I also think there's something beautiful about tripping in your day-to-day settings, because you see those objects that you like interact with on a day-to-day basis. And I think that lesson is so much more practical and applicable than maybe the transcendent like vacation journey trip of some of these other things.
I feel you on that. Depends on what you need in a certain moment. You know, for some people, they do need to get away from their everyday mundane symbolism. Because if they were to have that height of perception in their own life, that might be too much. That might be overwhelming. They might need to completely get away from life and see it from a fresh perspective and then come back.
Too.
But yeah, just
but I also see
where
how
you're at.
Doing it in the day-to-day adds to that sensitivity of the normality of everything we're doing. It becomes a lot less normal, actually.
Yeah.
Like from personal experience, you know, tripping in my own home and then seeing something like, wow, I haven't even given this lots of attention.
Yeah.
Like, it's got dust on it. It's so beautiful. I should utilize this more. And you see the life in a lot of the things that you have. You might just see as possessions or whatever, but, you know, you actually get to see the little glimpse or sparkle of life everything contains in it in the day-to-day, which could definitely be overwhelming if you've neglected those things in your life and you come into that and you're like, everything's alive and I haven't been treating it so well other than going out into the woods where you know everything is alive, or the jungle. Actually, but
I recently had some close friends of mine have a beautiful experience where they aren't frequent users of anything, and they took MDMA together and like really worked on those interpersonal relationships, and didn't do anything crazy, didn't go anywhere, didn't see anything wild. That just basically they spent time together, doing what they would normally do, like hanging out and talking and like listening to music and maybe even watching a little bit of TV. And just the like gratitude that they had for their shared relationship together after that and everything. And I think that that's like the beauty of this stuff, is that it enhances our appreciation for what we already have. It's great to want more for yourself, and it's great to want to rise to these new steps and accomplishments, but to take that step back and appreciate the beauty of what we have and put more effort into appreciating that.
That's truly what it's about, because I feel like the driven achiever is like a archetype. I don't remember who coined that phrase, but you know, when we're always trying to validate our self-worth by accomplishing things, you know, always trying to get to that next level, and that can be applied to spiritualism too. You know, it's like, oh well, I've got this spiritual merit badge, time to get the next one, you know, whatever. But like, isn't it really ultimately, like, especially in the realm of spirituality, what we're getting towards, what we're aiming for is presence, which is here right now, you know? And that's kind of like a going back. It's not a going forward. It's kind of just a sinking in.
It's a resting feeling almost.
But it can be totally awake as well, you know? It's that dualism of
truth.
Yeah, not
it's very centered right between it all.
Exactly. Dancing in the yin yang.
I've been really interested in this idea of like spiritual bypass lately. Like, I don't know if that's a term that you've heard people talk about, but that idea that you feel above like base level emotions, or you feel above when you're in the car and you're having road rage and screaming and like getting upset with yourself because like, oh, there I am not being that higher self that I am, that I want to be, and like trying to bypass the
oh no, I've been human.
Yes.
I'm acting like a human.
Yeah, it's kind of like I see when I see it in myself, I try to transform it into forgiveness. You know, it's not, but I've also noticed the tendency in myself to want to bypass the work and get straight to the lesson or whatever. You know, it's like, I mean, I don't want to go too deep into discussing world affairs, but you know,
Yeah.
like my tendency is to view the outside world and be like, well, that's all illusion anyway. So why don't
Yeah.
I just forgive it all, remind myself it's all going to be okay in the end, and therefore it is all okay right now. It's all working as this grand mandala meta machine that is perfect as is.
It is
Even
all
though it's
perfect.
disgusting, you know, it has a really nasty butthole, but it's a
Yeah.
part of the being, and it's perfect, you know, like it needs all those aspects. But, you know, but on Earth, people are suffering, and there's things we can do to help alleviate people's
Absolutely.
suffering, and that's the difference.
Where
Is
the
the
duality-
bypassing is not doing anything,
Mhm.
and the responsibility is, okay, what can I do? And I feel like what we all can do is, first and foremost, like live in the heart and work on ourselves. Because literally, if we transform stuff on the inside, the universe can't help but not literally reflect that.
And it's a domino effect too. Every time you
Exactly.
go out into this world and you bring that openness and that loving with you, then that is literally transforming others. It's so easy for us to judge and consider people less than. I thought it was beautiful that like Ram Dass always kept a picture of Donald Trump on his puja table.
Did he?
You know, I was, yeah, because that's a person and he's perfect too. And that's so hard for us.
He's playing his cosmic role. We might not like it, might not be pretty.
Yeah.
You know, we might not agree with what he's doing, but he's playing a role. And things are going to happen because of him playing that role. Just like you could say that for everybody.
Yeah.
You know? But he's an easy person to talk about because everyone loves to
Yeah.
shit on him.
And not, but at the same time, not letting that affect our activism and our we don't want things to keep going the way they're going
Right.
in a lot of different realms. Not to get too specific about anything political, but we recognize that while everything is perfect, that there's like some evil in this world, and
There's some messes we can help clean up.
yeah.
Yeah. And I just like to reiterate that the messes on the inside are the fundamental ones to clean up first. Because if I clean up my room without cleaning up my mind, I'm going to dirty it up in the same fashion in a week's time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the stuff on the outside, the outer world, is truly a reflection of the inside.
It's like we do the work inside, finding that peace, finding that center and balance. And then it's not like the world itself just totally changes, but then we're given the opportunity to walk those steps on the outside and kind of follow through physically with the work that we've already done internally.
It may not change drastically, but it will literally change. I mean, on a quantum level, if you change your vibration, your whole experience will also reflect that change, you know? And it's not something that we've documented scientifically, so it's hard to talk about,
Yeah.
you know? But it's something that intuitively I 100% believe. You know? I
Attraction.
mean, yeah, just think about it.
Yeah.
If you go outside and you're holding an energy of anger, you're gonna naturally
Have more
attract
experiences to
other
get-
people who are vibing at that same level. You're gonna get in your car and you're gonna start road raging, and you're gonna see other road ragers out there. If you go outside feeling peaceful and loving, and you go out there, you smile at other people who are smiling right back at you. That doesn't mean you won't also see some of the angry people, but just the way energy resonates,
Yeah.
you know, that's just...
And maybe somebody who wasn't smiling will see you smiling and smile back at you. Yeah, sometimes it's not about changing the world all at once. It's about the little pebbles. You can.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just figuring out what we can do and doing that for sure. So we usually do the intro and outro at a later date, the two of us, given like, you know, to
Kind of
prep
like
you without having to do that on the spot, because that kind of like puts more pressure on it.
Yeah.
But in the outro, we usually do like our takeaways. I was just curious if you had any that you would like to share, any like main points in this conversation that you would like to highlight, or that you feel like would just be like a takeaway to integrate into life after conversation?
An action step.
Yeah. Just to, I mean, I guess not fear the unknown, and then mostly just to be there for each other and how to be there for each other, to not to just open your heart to other people, I guess, whether you see them in grief or depression, like you guys talked about before. And that was that really was something that like kept ringing in my head as I thought about coming here, the way you guys talked about depression and how hard it is to tell somebody to sit with those emotions. That depression, if processed in the right way, will ultimately like bring you to a higher crescendo. And I think it applies a lot towards the ideas of grief and how we can be there for somebody, and essentially just holding space for them, not just holding space for someone and letting them feel what they're gonna feel, and recognizing that none of our emotions come on a timeline, none of our lessons come on a timeline, and that whether it's been 6 months and you haven't cried over that person that you lost, that's okay. If it's been 5 years and you find yourself curled up on the floor crying on your Xbox controller as you're playing Mortal Kombat, that's fine too, because this isn't something that anybody can be an expert at.
Right.
We keep trying.
We can have the courage to at least endure it.
Together,
Trust the
we're
process.
gonna do a little better.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a little easier and
Yeah.
not gonna feel so heavy. That's for sure.
Yeah, and the more that we share with each other without that fear of being the bummer or being I think we so much like don't want to bring other people down when we're going through our own trauma, and that is an idea that we kind of need to abandon.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's been
So
a humbling
true.
episode for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys for holding that space for me all the time,
Mm-hmm.
in here, out there. For sure.
Likewise.
Feeling a lot of gratitude.
Wow, what an episode.
I'm in the same place I was when we recorded it. It's almost a speechless feeling of awestruck from partaking in that conversation with you guys and feeling the emotional flows and ins and outs of how each of your experiences have led you to where you are now and been such like a crucial process in like that emotional spiritual maturation. And I definitely agree. A continuation of this conversation is not just in the books, but almost necessary.
I like that you brought up the spiritual maturation too, because just for clarity's sake, I definitely am not making the claim that I'm like, Mr. Buddha over here, like
Level
got all my
10
shit
awakened
set
soul.
up. Yeah. Awakened being coming at you. Open those hearts.
But I mean, you definitely got this level of openness and receptivity and maturity just to your nature that you provide on a consistent level. And I could tell from what you were sharing that, that process of grieving what some could perceive as a loss is
No, it's a loss.
a huge, yeah, for sure. I try not to think of it that way all the time. I also like to look at it as
I know what you're saying, but you gotta say it as it is too,
for sure. Can't beat around the bush about it. It is what it is.
The body stops working, that's a loss.
Yeah.
It might be a transition.
Transformation into something
for sure.
less physical, but
Right.
yeah, it is definitely a loss of that physical being.
But like we discussed in the conversation, it can be a beautiful thing too, just honoring someone's life. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways for me, was just, kind of grounding into just as a thought experiment, like, okay, what if this is our only life? This is our only dream, and we go into complete nothingness after we die. Not that that was what Chris's argument was, but just as a thought experiment, okay, well then how are we going to live these lives? How are we going to celebrate those that we do lose? And and like really focusing on that. And when you're in it, when you're in the maze of experience, when you're in the dream, like that's scary to think about. That sounds crazy what I just said. Oh yeah, dude, but like what about the rest of it? What about the void?
Existentialism.
Yeah. Okay, dude, it might be a good dream, but like,
Right.
you know, I mean, that's
what if
it's
none
a
of it
guttural
really does
feeling.
exist or matter after this? It is just like nothingness or allness that, you know, you can't even encapsulate a physical life. It's just gone, body shed, no physical memory of any of it, and the energy is on into another state of whatever that might be.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, man. But, and you know, you know that I don't believe that. I think this is less real than, you know, what's waiting for us after these lives. But my point is, if you did believe that, like, what's the function of that belief? You know, I've mentioned that before. I'm very much about, like, what's the function of our beliefs? Like, whether it be spiritual or just mundane beliefs, like, what does that lead us to act within? How does that influence our behaviors? You know, so if this is it, if YOLO, how are we going to live? You know, how are we going to celebrate the lives that we're in right here, right now? And that is like a beautiful silver lining of that belief system.
truly, and
Whether it
even
be
if
true or
it's
not.
not a belief to be agreed with internally by each other, ourselves, it's definitely so much fun to postulate the possibilities and the infinite potentials, because every single like philosophy or theory or just point of view in general we're able to step into, I feel like expands the greater view that we're able to have in general.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And, you know, people are getting all... Sorry, but I'm going to take it there for a second. I know it's already been a long episode, but hear me out. So, you know, people are getting pretty doomsday out there right now in the media, and, you know... I think that's a perfect correlation, honestly, because it makes me think, okay, so if we're in the end of times, how are we going to live those days?
We're gonna
And-
come together in oneness, in unity, for change, for ourselves, for others? Or are we gonna freak out,
Yeah.
run around, like, it's the end of the world? Are we gonna bunk ourselves up individually, like, you know, hole ourselves in? Like, two extremes right there, but...
Jump in the toilet, go ahead and flush that motherfucker. I'm out. You
I'm
know,
hell gonna
like-
watch it burn.
right. And, you know, like every reaction is valid in a certain sense of, I see where people are coming from. Like, I have my ways of reacting to these types of things, too. You know, and for me, it's easy to talk about this right now, but, like, in my body, when I ask myself that, what am I going to do? If this is my last week on Earth, of course I don't believe it is. But if it is, if I did believe it, how would that change my behavior? You know? And that's that dynamic, is that I'm telling myself it's not true. So in a certain sense, I'm leaving myself room to slack, to...
To second guess, you know, create a little room for fear to creep in almost. And
Well, I was going to say leave room for laziness to continue to
Oh, true.
override, and just procrastinating what we would do if this was our last day on Earth. We went to the doctor and they said, you got 24 hours, kid. What are you going to do? You know, you're going to get out your bucket list.
I can't talk about that here. No.
To be clear, I'm not asking your specifics.
I know, I'm just playing. But truly, and I was kind of taking it as that, you know, if we're not, like, allowing ourselves the space to continue moving and really, like, being there present, giving it our all, like, we're living, like, every moment, it's the potentially last one we get to live, like, if we're not doing that, like, then what are we doing? I feel like it does leave room for, like, a little fear, like, or if for me, I might be too afraid to get out there, so I got to take a couple deep breaths and remember, like, the moment here, and that I might not see another one. Like, something could happen to anyone. And I was just talking to you downstairs about how there have been a lot of people lost over the past year, friends and friends of friends and, you know, family members, and shit's just almost surreal. So
Yeah, we've reached that point in the unfolding, you know, where a lot of people are witnessing the things that are being lost. But again, I really do want to focus more on that things are transitioning. I feel like an era is closing.
yeah, it's
I feel
not
like
the
we're
end of the
moving
world,
through
but
something.
it's the end of the world as we know it.
Exactly.
You know, it's just a big shift. And poles are
Yeah. And within ourselves too, man. I mean, that's what I keep thinking about when people are talking about the apocalypse and all this nonsense. I'm like, yeah, but that's true in every moment. You know, it's kind of a little bit what we touched upon in the seasonal depression episode, where we were talking about the new year coming in the middle of the winter. Well, that spirit of renewal is available in every moment, just as the spirit of the apocalypse is available in every moment. And it can be a good thing if you choose it to be a good thing.
Yeah, if you're able to gracefully shed those layers instead of holding on to them for dear life, like digging your nails into the wood and wearing your fingers down, or you could let it go. You know, it's a painful thing to think about, but that's almost what it's like to hold on to these ideologies and processes that are essentially dying off.
And even if you can't gracefully let go of things as if they weren't even a part of your identity at one point, because they were, even if you can't do that, allow yourself to witness it. Allow yourself to do that hard work. If you got to do some painful digging, I mean, that's what I've been thinking about, man. I've been like, okay, well, what parts of myself do I need to let go? And I still witness it. I still witness myself, you know, doing things that I don't need to be doing. Like, do I need my daily dessert at 10 o'clock every night? No, I don't, you know? Been trying to get more into just like, all right, let me do the whole intermittent fasting thing. Like, actually stop eating food at a certain time of day.
Yeah,
you know what
intentionally,
I mean?
even if you get a little tummy growl, because you know you'll be just fine.
Exactly.
I was doing the intermittent fasting for a little while. Energy felt good. My body would get hot randomly. My head would get kind of hot as like my body was working through some of like maybe the fats or toxins that were stored inside.
Yeah.
And, like my head would just like, I'd get kind of like sweaty or something. Like my body was literally like cleaning itself out and these toxins were getting worked through. So like there's some truth to it there. And you know, I fell off after maybe a month or so, but
I've gone in waves for sure, but I'm getting back into it.
Nice.
Kara and I were talking about doing like, I mean, I proposed the idea of doing like one cheat day a week and then like 3 15-hour fasts, or maybe I did 2 12-hour fasts, 3 15-hour fasts, and then do one day where we do a 24-hour fast. So it's not like you go necessarily the whole day without eating, but like you still have dinner at the same time you had dinner last night. You know what I mean? So you're still getting all of the calories and stuff in, maybe a little less. I mean, if I ate all the food I ate in a whole day in one sitting, I guess I've done it before. I don't know.
Engorged.
Yeah, but I don't know. Anyway, so it's an idea. We haven't done the 24-hour one yet, but I've been doing a bunch of 15s and 12s, and it does feel good. You know, it's one step to take to be less
vegan,
greedy.
I would definitely fast a lot more often. Not like intermittent, like every other day kind of fasting or whatever, but you know, once a week or once every other week or so, I'd not eat for a whole day and just drink tons of water, and it felt amazing because I feel like my body was already so clean from that diet that it was just
easier
cake.
to
It was
do
so
that,
much easier,
yeah.
you know. I wasn't like craving for nutrients because I was already eating a pretty nutrient-filled diet, and
Right.
you know, all I really needed was the water. And
Heck
you
yeah.
know, towards the end of like beginning of the next day, I'd wake up and I'd be like, I'm gonna make some avocado toast, 4 pieces, gonna be great. But and you know, because my body was pretty damn hungry at that point.
Yeah,
but,
for sure. Yeah, I've definitely done some fasts myself. Done water fast, juice fasts. Kara likes to do the juice fast. So it's honestly been a while since I've done a straight water fast. But
I've never
they're
tried
good.
juice or anything.
You haven't?
Well, I've drank juice, but I've never done a juice fast.
You know, yeah, it makes it a lot easier, man, because you still have that to look forward to, and you do some carrots and stuff, and you can get like, it's sweet, you know.
That sounds super good.
Still get your sugar fix and everything.
I think it's a good tool for
so those are
examining.
easier for me, but
like
it is nice to go straight water fast. I mean, dry fasts are a thing too. But anyway, I'll cut this short because we could do a whole episode talking about
Fasting
that whole
and
thing. Yeah.
health, bodily health.
Yeah, but just to give an example of how I'm trying to like be honest with myself and actually like be more on top of my behavior. You know, it's easy to just talk about how we need to change ourselves and change the world and then go about my autopilot, you know. Guilty. But
It definitely happens, but I feel like every little action pushes us a little bit further.
yeah, for sure. Heck yeah, so let's keep doing that. Did you have any other takeaways, or maybe you want to give an example of something about some change or something that you're letting go of in your life?
I have mentioned to you recently how I'm smoking a little less pot.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is definitely nice. You know, I'm not waking and baking every morning and going through the day like that. It's not that it was ever hard, but now it's my second nature to just get up and move on with my day, get my natural energy a-flowing, and then, you know, have a little bit of herb as a treat towards the end of the day, or, you
Right
know,
on.
zone into my meditation with it, using it more as a tool rather than like a recreational, consistent activity.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that's definitely a conscious practice because it's so easy to like spark one up in the morning. Herb is plentiful in my life. It's
Right.
a blessing for sure, but I want to be able to respect that a little more. And
Exactly. Yeah.
so that's a step I'm taking, as well as my eating habits have just naturally come into better alignment. I've only had meat a few times this month, and you know, I said I was vegan for a while, and then definitely fell off that train into a more opportunitarian, kind of lifestyle. And that was wonderful for a while it lasted, but now I'm at the point financially and mentally where I'm like, okay, I gotta start cracking down a little more consciously there. And
Gotcha.
yeah, so my body's feeling good, mind's feeling better, and not getting stoned and eating grease all the time. And
that's
it
all good
definitely goes
news.
hand in hand, I'd say. It's easier to eat
Definitely.
worse foods
Oh,
if I'm
definitely.
just blitzed and have the munchies like a mofo.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I will admit, munchies have been an issue in the past.
cheese balls.
How distant of the past? I can't remember.
Yeah.
But no, I'm with you on that. Heck yeah,
Change.
that's
It's
all good news.
imminent, and it's
Yeah.
important to embrace it.
Cool.
And it's a part of that process.
Well, let's keep checking in with each other and make sure we're staying accountable and all that good
100%.
stuff. We could definitely do full episodes about both of those topics, so we'll cut it off here. But appreciate you guys all listening this far into the episode, and maybe just, you know, take a moment to just be real with yourself. What is in your life that doesn't need to be in your life, that's not actually helping you help yourself, and therefore help your community.
And allow ourselves to grieve it as we let it go.
Yeah,
it's a
right.
part of ourselves that we are having to release and move on, and it's not always a painless process, that's for sure.
More in that part of the identity that we're choosing to no longer identify with. It is,
And that
it is
was
a struggle. but
question
it
I
can
wanted to
happen.
raise, like mourning and grief. What is the similarities and what is the difference between? And maybe if anyone feels they have an idea on what, you know, mourning and grief is, or what one has a process in the other, or even the differences, like, shoot us an email at breakthroughconsciousness@gmail.com.
Maybe even easier, hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, Breakthrough Consciousness on both of those. What's the Instagram one? Breakthrough.consciousness.pod.
That is exactly it.
Yeah, so come check us out. Let's talk.
Indeed. So for anybody that's still tuning in, got a little treat for you guys. I felt like it was a good time to switch up some music, and Sean's a wonderful musician, has been sitting on some new tracks that he's aiming to release here soon. So I was like, do you have any music you might want to put in on the intro and outro? And felt like that'd be a nice way to vibe into the episode and to ride out with. So we've got one of his new tracks titled Soul Ray. We're going to put the rest of it here for you guys at the end. I hope you enjoy.
Yeah. Thank you, Clayton. Appreciate the encouragement. It's funny, actually, we were both having the same thoughts. I was feeling like it was probably time to stray away from the Full House vibes of the intro that we've been working with for the last little bit. Yeah, so this song, Soul Ray, is already released, so you can find it on your favorite streaming platform. It's the third single to be released for my upcoming EP called the Sola EP. So it'll be 6 songs total. This one was actually really cool because it was one of the songs that really just flew out of me. I wrote and recorded it within a day or two, which really hasn't happened to me before. So yeah, I felt it was fitting for this episode on grief, you know, just the theme of surrender and just kind of letting go into the flow of life and love. So you heard the first half of it in the intro, and here's the rest of the song. If you want to piece it all together, you can find it on Spotify or wherever you listen to music. Appreciate you guys listening.
Much love, everybody, till we get out of the loop and into it all again.
Where I am alone.
wonder.